Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki, Sharma, Upadhyay. Let's get started. Where is Mullah Baradar, the Taliban's deputy prime minister? He has gone missing. On Monday, we asked you the same question. In fact, there is intense speculation in Kabul and elsewhere. Some say that Baradar has been shot dead. The Taliban deny all of this. They keep saying he's traveling, but they won't say to where. So what happened to Mullah Baradar, the most famous face of the Taliban? Turns out he fought with a key Haqqani leader late last week. It happened inside the presidential palace in Kabul. There were clashes. 1 month after the Taliban took over, an intense battle for power and influence has broken out within the ranks, one that has split the new leadership of Afghanistan. Tonight, we'll talk about what's happening behind the scenes and inside the Taliban. We begin, as always, with Gravitas Global Headlines.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke to his Australian counterpart Scott Morrison on issues including the Afghanistan crisis, ahead of their first in-person Quad summit in Washington next week. North Korea has fired 2 short-range ballistic missiles into the sea. This was Pyongyang's second launch in less than a week. It came as the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi was in Seoul for talks with his South Korean counterpart. Taiwan conducted anti-invasion drills amid tensions with China, landing fighter jets on a makeshift runway, simulating what they would do if their air bases were damaged by enemy forces. The UK to begin administering booster shots to all those above 50 years of age.
We're going to be building even higher walls of immunization.
Frontline health workers and clinically vulnerable from the next week, paving the way for a broad revaccination program in the country. The Chinese ambassador to Britain has been banned from attending an event in the British Parliament after Beijing imposed sanctions on some UK lawmakers who highlighted alleged human rights abuses in Xinjiang. More than 1,400 dolphins were massacred in a day in Denmark's Faroe Islands as part of the Danish territory's centuries-old traditional Grindadrap hunt. A wildfire that burned for 6 days and devastated forests near a Costa del Sol resort in southern Spain has been brought under control. The fire had burned through at least 9,670 hectares. About 1,000 firefighters, including members of the military emergency unit, backed by some 50 aircraft, worked to put out the blaze. Heavy rains have triggered floods in France, leaving several key roads damaged. At least 800 rescuers have been mobilized. Additional crews are expected to arrive. This is the second time in a month that France has been hit by unprecedented rainfall. Bayern Munich began their Champions League campaign with a 3-0 drubbing of Barcelona at the Nou Camp. 13 months after the famous 8-2 win over the Catalans, the Germans were once again dominant, with reigning World Player of the Year Robert Lewandowski scoring a brace and Thomas Müller also getting on the scoresheet. Swiss champion Young Boys delivered a major upset on the opening night of the Champions League season by beating Manchester United 2-1. Cristiano Ronaldo gave United the lead with his 3rd goal since his return. But the visitors struggled after being reduced to 10 men. Mumi Ngamalio got the equalizer before Jordan Sibachu grabbed a 95th minute winner.
It's been 1 month, exactly 30 days, since the Taliban overthrew the democratically elected government of Afghanistan. They took Kabul to set up what they call an Islamic emirate. Since then, violence and chaos has been an everyday affair. The world is not challenging the Taliban's power grab. Their rule is absolute, it seems. Why then are 2 of their leaders hiding? For days now, 2 top leaders of the Taliban have been missing. Mullah Baradar, the so-called emir of this new Islamic Republic, and Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar, the interim deputy prime minister. Now, Akhundzada, we know, is a ghost. He hasn't shown his face since the Taliban took Kabul. But Mullah Baradar is the most recognizable face of the Taliban. And there is intense speculation now over his absence. Is he dead? Is he sick? Or is he just missing/hiding? We asked the same question on Monday. That's when reports said that Baradar had been shot dead. We could not verify those reports. The Taliban denied them. But they won't spell out where he is. Where is Mullah Baradar? What happened to him? What explains the Taliban's silence? Infighting. A war is playing out within the ranks, a power struggle, a race for credit. Who gets the credit for the grand victory against the West? And who gets to decide the future of Afghanistan? There is fierce disagreement within the Taliban, and the senior leadership are fighting each other, quite literally. Late last week, clashes broke out at the presidential palace in Kabul. Reports say Baradar was meeting Khalil-ur-Rahman Haqqani, the acting minister for refugees, also another globally listed terrorist. The talks led to disagreement and ended in a brawl. The 2 camps clashed, Baradar versus Haqqani. Things took an ugly turn. Reports say Baradar was very upset and left for Kandahar. What led to this fight? The shape of the new interim government. Apparently, Baradar is unhappy with it. He did not want a government that was made up of just Taliban fighters. You know, the promise of having an inclusive government that was not kept. More importantly, he did not want a demotion. You see, ever since the Taliban took power, Baradar was tipped to be the prime minister, the most recognizable face, someone that the West has dealt with. Then Pakistan played its card and Baradar became or was named the deputy prime minister. Understandably, that's a sore point. Baradar is seen as the moderate face of the Taliban. He and his supporters believe that diplomacy is their best chance, the best way forward. So the government should represent that. It should have fewer militant elements and more of those men who sat in the Taliban's front office in Doha. But Baradar is being challenged by the Haqqanis. They argue that that fighting delivered them victory, not diplomacy. So the fighters should be on top. Haqqanis control a large number of the fighters, those who were part of the offensive. So basically what the Haqqanis are saying is this: they won the war for the Taliban and they should get the upper hand in the government, which by the way they already have thanks to Pakistan. At least in the caretaker government, the Haqqanis have got a good deal. 4 key ministers are from the Haqqani network. Sirajuddin Haqqani is the interior minister, the head of the Haqqani group. He controls the entire security establishment in Afghanistan. He's also on the UN terror watch list. Then we have Khalil-ur-Rahman Haqqani, Sirajuddin's uncle. He was the one who clashed with Baradar last week. He's the Minister of Refugees. Najibullah Haqqani is another UN-listed terrorist in the Taliban government. He's the Minister of Communication. And finally, we have Sheikh Abdul Baqi Haqqani, the Minister for Higher Education. He's the only Haqqani in government who is not a listed terrorist. So we have 2 power centers, 2 distinct camps, the Baradar camp and the Haqqani camp, both fighting for more power. The divide is for the world to see, but the Taliban continue to deny it.
The earlier government had opposition, not anymore. Now Afghanistan is independent. The other important thing is that the people of Islamic Emirate have vast and good experience and have the goodwill to work for the people. Previously, those who opposed us used to fight. Now when we came, we have forgiven all our adversaries. Some of them are abroad, the rest are in Kabul who have been given general amnesty. Now we don't have any opposition, neither any opposing territory. Our expectations is that we will be in good and cordial contact with all of the international community.
No matter what they say, the cracks are showing. The infighting is just one of their problems, though. The protests are another. They have spread beyond Kabul. Look at these images. They're from Kandahar. Thousands of Afghans protesting. This happened on Tuesday. This is against forced evictions from government properties. Reports say around 3,000 families were asked to leave from an army colony, so they decided to hit the streets and block roads. How will a divided Taliban deal with all of this? They only know how to use guns. Will they shoot at the protesters or each other? The Afghanistan story, unfortunately, has not reached its worst point yet. And all this chaos benefits just one party, Pakistan. Their prodigal sons are ruling Kabul. Their prime minister says Afghans have broken the shackles of slavery. Apparently, the Taliban are emancipators, not terrorists. The Pakistani deep state adores the Taliban. They're like a hired gun, they think. Point them at Kashmir, point them at Central Asia, the Taliban will readily agree. But what about the Pakistani people? Do they also like the Taliban? Well, the answer is yes and no. There's a video that has gone viral on Pakistani social media. It's a short interview with a Pakistani girl. She was asked two questions. Number one, do you support the Taliban? Her answer was very clear. Yes, I'm with the Taliban. The next question, though, was a bit tricky. What if the Taliban ruled Pakistan? Here's how she responded.
I'm with Taliban.
You're with the Taliban?
Yes, yeah.
What if the Taliban were in the government here?
No.
No,
I don't
you don't want that.
I don't want that.
You don't want that?
No, I don't want that.
But it's okay in Afghanistan.
Talk about hypocrisy. You're okay with the Taliban as your neighbor, but not as your landlord. And let me tell you this. This is not a one-off. Gallup conducted a survey on the Taliban's popularity in Pakistan. Here's what they found. 55% people were happy with the Taliban's takeover. 55% people in Pakistan. Only 25% were unhappy. 20% could not care less. So to all the Taliban sympathizers, to everyone giving them a second chance, here's a question. Would you live under the Taliban? Would you vote them to power in your country? If not, you have no right to comment. We've seen shocking remarks from so-called policymakers. The US State Department says the Taliban are businesslike. Britain's top general calls them country boys. Great. So why don't you put them in the White House or Downing Street? Well, they won't, because these people are sitting thousands of miles away. They live in democracies. They have a constitution and a Bill of Rights. Why should Afghans be denied that same right? And I'll tell you what the problem is. None of these countries actually like the Taliban, not America, not Britain, deep down perhaps not even Pakistan. It's all about politics of convenience. Pakistan gets strategic leverage from the Taliban, a proxy to stir trouble against India, an excuse to get money from the West. What about the US? In the 1980s, they used the Mujahideen to get back at the Soviets. Today, they are partners in the war against ISIS-K, ISIS Khorasan, the lesser evil apparently. Same with China. They openly support the Taliban, but crush Islamic thought in Xinjiang. The bottom line is this: the Taliban are just pawns. They're not liberators. They're not an inspiration, just pawns. Pakistani people may support them, but they're disgusted by their ideology. They hate the idea of living under the Taliban, and who wouldn't, frankly? And can you compartmentalize extremism? Can you support the Taliban in Afghanistan and oppose their ideology at home? You cannot. You should not. Terror groups in Pakistan are emboldened, and here's what they think. If the Taliban can do it, then why not them? Why can't they topple the Pakistan government? The biggest threat is the TTP, the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. They're basically an ideological cousin of the Afghan Taliban. The Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. They operate in Pakistan. Since the fall of Kabul, they have stepped up their offensive. In the month of August alone, there were 22 attacks. 7 in North Waziristan, 13 in South Waziristan, and 1 each in the districts of Mardan and Bannu. At least 52 Pakistani security personnel were killed. This month, there have been 3 attacks already, all of them in Balochistan. At least 9 security personnel have been killed. This is the return on Pakistan's investment in Afghanistan, suicide bombings and landmines. There is no difference between the Afghan Taliban and the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. One of them won the war, the other is still fighting. That's the only difference. The Pakistani deep state is oblivious to this, it seems. The Taliban still haven't denounced the TTP. In fact, last month they released hundreds of TTP terrorists from Afghan jails. Plus, they have not recognized the Durand line yet, the border that separates Afghanistan and Pakistan, the one that Pakistan wants Afghanistan to recognize, the Durand line. And this is where Islamabad gets it wrong. They underestimate the Taliban's Pashtun identity. Look at their cabinet. 30 out of 33 ministers are Pashtuns. And this ethnic brotherhood is a boost for the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. They can always count on help from across the border. Unlike Afghanistan, the stakes are much higher here. Pakistan may not be a rich state, but it's a nuclear state. What if terrorists get their hands on this nuclear arsenal? That is the big worry for the world, and that is why the West keeps going back to help Pakistan, not out of love, but out of fear. And the country that harbors this fear the most is the United States of America. For far too long, the US has remained oblivious to Pakistan's shenanigans, or have ignored them. They have not raised their finger against the Pakistani support for the Taliban and several other terrorist groups. Now the pressure to act is building up. American lawmakers are pressing the Biden administration to reassess its relationship with Pakistan. Some even want Washington to end all ties with Islamabad. This includes lawmakers from both sides, Republicans and Democrats. They want America to snap ties with Pakistan, at least 9 of them. For 2 days now, they've been confronting the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, with a barrage of questions over America's inaction against Pakistan. What did they say, and how did Blinken respond? Our next report explores.
The Americans. And they are trying to somehow...
Pakistan has always been crucial to America's foreign policy on Afghanistan. In the 1980s, Washington relied on Islamabad to send weapons and funds to the Mujahideen. In the 1990s, it relied on Islamabad to initiate talks with the Taliban. And in the early 2000s, America used Pakistan's help to cripple the Taliban. Or at least, that's what the Pentagon believed it was doing. Pakistan took billions in military and economic aid from America, only to make the Taliban stronger. The Afghan debacle stands as testimony. There's mounting evidence to prove how Pakistan helped the Taliban take the throne in Kabul. Yet the Biden administration remains oblivious to Pakistan's double dealings. Now the pressure to act is building. American lawmakers cutting across party lines are pressing the Biden administration to punish Pakistan for its shenanigans in Afghanistan. This includes Congressmen Bob Menendez, James Risch, Marco Rubio, Ron Johnson, Mike Rounds, Chris Van Hollen, Joaquin Castro, Bill Keating, and Scott Perry. For 2 straight days, these lawmakers confronted the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken with a barrage of questions on Pakistan's role in Afghanistan. Congressman Joaquin Castro, a Democrat from Texas, asked Blinken to reassess America's relationship with Pakistan, given its long-time support for the Taliban.
Pakistan has harbored Taliban leaders and provided other forms of support to the group. As my colleague noted, Pakistan's leader cheered the Taliban taking over Afghanistan. Is it time for the United States to reassess its relationship with Pakistan and reassess its status as a major non-NATO ally?
Somebody in the White House has authority.
Republican Senator James Risch said that America needs to come to terms with Pakistan's role in the entire matter.
We also must understand Pakistan's role in this entire matter, as the chairman has alluded to. This is a difficult but important situation.
Republican Senator Marco Rubio said if a country like Pakistan remains an American ally, what chance does Washington have in confronting China?
There was an announcement today there'll be a meeting of the Quad fairly soon, which is a good development, except that in the Pacific region, if you're India, you're looking at this and saying, if the United States allowed Pakistan to unravel their standing, because the Pakistani role in all this, and I think multiple administrations are guilty of ignoring it, the Pakistani role in enabling the Taliban is ultimately a victory for those pro-Taliban hardliners in the Pakistani government. They have to be looking at this and saying, if the United States could have, a third-rate power like Pakistan unravel its aims, what chance do they have of confronting China? So I think this leaves us in a terrible situation.
Mr. Chairman. For all their questions, Blinken's answer remained more or less the same. He constantly reiterated that the Biden administration would reassess its relationship with Pakistan.
And I think you're very right to point at the role that Pakistan has played throughout the past 20 years and even before. And it is one that has involved hedging its bets constantly about the future of Afghanistan. It's one that's involved harboring members of the Taliban, including the Haqqanis. This is one of the things that we're going to be looking at in the days and weeks ahead, the role that Pakistan has played over the last 20 years, but also the role that we would want to see it play in the coming years.
The statement may have come too little too late, but it reveals how the Biden administration is under pressure to act against Pakistan. It should also serve as a warning to Islamabad, who in its quest to use the Taliban against India may lose whatever little legitimacy it enjoys on the international stage. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Let's talk about the Taliban's second best friend, China. China wants strategic heft. It wants real estate. Afghanistan can offer both, plus a treasure trove of minerals worth $1 trillion. The Chinese are wasting no time. A state-owned enterprise in China has set its eyes on Afghanistan's largest copper mine, the Mes Aynak copper mine. In 2007, the site was leased to China for 30 years. But due to instability and the war in Afghanistan, the project was halted. Now the Taliban are in power, they're friends of China, and China is looking to relaunch its operations. Why is this mine so significant? How much copper does it hold? How much is it worth? And what are China's plans? Here's a report.
Situated in a barren region of Afghanistan's Logar province is the Mes Aynak copper mine, a site that contains Afghanistan's largest copper deposit. It holds 240 million tons of 2.3% grade copper ore, which makes it one of the largest untapped high-grade projects in the world. The reserves itself are estimated to be worth $50 billion. In November 2007, the China Metallurgical Group and the Jiangxi Copper Co. Limited acquired a 30-year lease for this mine. The agreement was worth $3.4 billion. As part of the deal, they pledged to develop the mine and build some crucial infrastructure around it, like a road for transportation, a railway line to carry shipments, and a generating plant to power the smelter, and feed China's insatiable appetite for raw copper. But the plan failed. Due to the security situation in Afghanistan, Chinese companies went back without mining even a ton. Now, with Taliban 2.0 in the saddle, China is looking to revive its plan. The Taliban have arrived at the mining site. They're touring the area, preparing for the arrival of Chinese engineers.
As we heard from the authorities, this is the world's second largest project. We have declined the former government, and now that the Islamic Emirate is ruling, this is our first and only visit here. After this, the Islamic Emirate and the company's technical people will work on it together. As we know from history, this is a huge mine in Afghanistan, and it is the nation's great wealth.
On the Taliban's trail was our correspondent Anas Malik. After a tiresome gathering of permissions, he managed to travel to the mine, escorted by 2 gun-toting men for the entire duration of the trip. It took us 90 minutes to reach Mes Aynak, where the mining fields are located. They lie abandoned and inaccessible.
I'm standing in Anak village in Logar province. It's roughly 60 kilometers from Kabul city, the capital of Afghanistan. The white office sort of that you see behind me is known as the base to the Anak copper field. It's an office that's usually functional, but it has not been functional for a while. Messinek literally translates into small copper fields. It has 240 million tons of copper reserves that can potentially go up to an economy of 3 trillion as the Taliban have taken over, but that largely remains unexplored for the time being.
So by when does China plan to restart its operations? There's no fixed date. For now, the chairman of the Jiangxi group has said that the group is monitoring the situation and looking forward to restarting construction at the earliest. For the Taliban, this project means more money and legitimacy. For China, it means an expansion of its Belt and Road Initiative juggernaut. But dealing with an unstable regime has never been easy for Beijing. From Venezuela to Uzbekistan, Chinese projects have suffered tremendous losses due to instability. What's the guarantee this won't happen in the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan? Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Afghanistan is not alone on China's radar. Their warships are sailing to uncharted waters, as far as Alaska on America's western coast. What are they doing there? Sending a message to the US. China's biggest rivals will soon assemble in Washington, D.C. It's the first in-person Quad summit. On the agenda are 4 C's: COVID, climate change, cybersecurity, and of course, China. A strong Quad is China's nightmare. So what does Beijing do? What it does best: battleship diplomacy. Last month, they dispatched 4 warships near Alaska. They were spotted by the US Coast Guard between August 29th and 30th. The ships did not enter US waters, but they did sail near Aleutian Islands, which is part of America's exclusive economic zone. Now, one of the ships deployed was a Type 055, which is China's most advanced warship. It is 180 meters long. It weighs 13,000 tons, and can engage multiple targets in the air. Now, you don't take this ship on routine patrols. This was clearly about sending a message. Did the US get that message? Well, here's what the Pentagon says. All interactions between the Coast Guard and PLA Navy were in accordance with international laws and norms. At no point did the PLA Navy task force enter US territorial waters. Business as usual. That's what the Pentagon says. But Chinese state media has a different take. Global Times, for one, is calling it a tit for tat. US vessels sail near the South China Sea, so Chinese vessels are now sailing near American waters. Let me read what the so-called military expert wrote. This is what he said. The US might feel a little uncomfortable to see Chinese warships on its doorsteps. This is a countermeasure and a signal against the US actions of hegemony. Just one problem. America is not raising hell. If Washington is indeed rattled, they're doing a very good job of hiding it. And rightly so. The PLA Navy is a regional bully. They act tough in the South China Sea, but their far sea capabilities are still suspect. So while this is definitely a provocation, it's not big enough to derail the Quad. In fact, it reaffirms the need for this summit, the Quad summit. China's ambitions won't end with the South China Sea. It will expand to America's west coast. China, of course, denies all of this. They're calling themselves the victims here, the poor regional power bullied by America and its friends. Listen to this.
China has always believed that any regional cooperation framework should go with the trend of times to be peaceful and progressive, and to help improve the trust and cooperation between countries in the region. It should not target any third party or harm their interest. Forming cliques to isolate, exclude, and target other countries is against the trend of times and runs counter to the aspirations of countries and regions.
Meet, talk, but leave us out of it. That is the message from Beijing. You see, China thought the Quad was a fad, an alliance that will eventually lose steam. Here's what their Foreign Minister Wang Yi said in 2018. Quad may get some attention, but it will soon dissipate. He compared it to sea foam in the Indo-Pacific. By 2020, the tone changed. The same man, Wang Yi, described the Quad as a security threat. He called it the new NATO. So much for sea foam. The fact is, the Quad is getting stronger. Like all alliances, it faces challenges, it has faced setbacks. But there is agreement on one key principle, and that is a free and open Indo-Pacific. This vision puts the Quad directly in conflict with China, whether Beijing likes it or not. Their first big test could be Taiwan. China has stepped up airspace violations. Their jets are buzzing all around Taiwan. So is the island preparing for effective? The island is in fact preparing for an effective response. On Wednesday, Taiwan's Air Force carried out military drills. President Tsai Ing-wen personally oversaw them. Multiple fighter jets landed on makeshift runways. The plan is to prepare for a Chinese invasion. If air bases and airfields are destroyed, how will Taiwan respond? These military drills focus on that scenario. They will continue for a week. It tells you how serious the threat is. China has never ruled out annexing Taiwan by force, so the island must live in constant alert. Imagine the same situation across the Indo-Pacific, dozens of countries all living in fear of China. Not all of them have US weaponry or US money. The Quad is a symbol of hope for these countries, an insurance against Chinese expansionism. And it's good to have that insurance policy. But can these allies trust the US? That's an important question. Is the US a reliable, a stable partner? The allies may have a good reason to doubt America. Some shocking revelations have come out of Washington, D.C. In the final days of the Trump administration, America's top military commander, General Mark Milley, was deeply worried. He feared that Donald Trump, the president, could order a nuclear strike. So he called a secret meeting of top military officials. They were told to not act on strike orders from the president unless the general personally signed them off. Our next report brings you the story of a general who hid America's nukes from President Trump.
And it's going to get done. I could see myself letting
It's a stunning revelation. In the final months of the Trump administration, America's top military general was a paranoid man. General Mark A. Milley feared Donald Trump could start an unnecessary war with China. So he made two secret phone calls to his counterpart in Beijing, assuring him the US had no intention to strike. The first phone call happened on the 30th of October 2020, 4 days before the presidential election in America. Here is what Milley told General Li Sucheng of the People's Liberation Army. If we're going to attack, I'm going to call you ahead of time. The second phone call went out on the 8th of January 2021, 2 days after the siege of the US Capitol. Milley said, "We are 100% steady. Everything is fine." That final phone call was made when tensions were high between America and China. The US intelligence reports were painting a grim picture. They said China believed the United States was preparing to attack. Trump's constant criticism against China for the pandemic wasn't helping either.
We must hold accountable the nation which unleashed this plague onto the world, China.
So General Milley decided to take matters into his own hands and placed two phone calls to Beijing without telling his then commander-in-chief. But a war with China wasn't his only worry. Milley also feared that Donald Trump could order a nuclear war, so he decided to hide the nukes from the president. Milley summoned senior officers to review the procedures for launching nuclear weapons. Once again, secret orders were issued. Milley told the officers that they need to check with him first if they get strike orders. No matter what the president tells them to do, Milley was quizzed by U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, too. During a phone call, she asked what safeguards are in place to prevent Trump from starting a nuclear war. A transcript of the conversation quotes Pelosi saying, "He is crazy. You know he's crazy." Milley replied, "I agree with you on everything." Trump is accusing Milley of treason. Already, the general was facing heat over the botched-up withdrawal from Afghanistan. A group of 87 retired military officers are demanding his resignation. These revelations have given fresh momentum to that demand. Top Republicans are now gunning for Milley. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
About this, let's for the moment talk about Apple's biggest competitor, Facebook. It's been hit by yet another controversy. Facebook's popular platform Instagram is toxic for teenagers. It is pushing them towards anxiety, even suicide. And that's not even the most shocking part of the story. Facebook knew that Instagram is making teenagers sick, but chose not to tell the world about it.
Instagram is toxic for teenagers. Facebook has known this for a while, but it chose not to share this with the world. Now internal documents from Facebook have leaked, and they described how the world's biggest photo-sharing app is making the youth sick. Here's what the documents have revealed. Facebook has been studying how Instagram affects millions of teenagers for 3 years now. They found that the app makes body image issues worse for 1 in 3 teen girls. Teenage boys, too, are being harmed by the app. 14% of them in the United States said that Instagram made them feel worse about themselves. For some of the teens, the negative effects of Instagram can be dangerous. The app could be pushing young teens towards suicide. 13% of British users and 6% of American users traced their suicidal thoughts back to the app. These revelations confirm what previous studies have found. Researchers in the past have often linked the use of Instagram to serious health issues. A study in the United Kingdom earlier found that using Instagram and other platforms can lead to high levels of anxiety, depression, bullying, poor sleeping habits. They can even foster a negative body image. Now Facebook's own internal studies have confirmed these findings, but the company chose not to make them public. And that's not the only thing that Facebook did not reveal. The same documents also describe how the company differentiated among different users. Millions of VIPs, including athletes and politicians, were exempted from the platform's content moderation rules. They were put in an elite tier of users called X-Check. As a result, some of these users got away after posting harmful content. Stuff like revenge porn and misinformation. One of the users who had these privileges was football star Neymar. In 2019, he posted nude photographs of a woman who accused him of rape. Usually, content like this will be quickly taken down, but due to Neymar's elite status, the post remained on his profile for more than a day, and more than 50 million people saw the photographs. Facebook has already been in hot water over user privacy concerns. Now, its services like Instagram could be making teenagers sick. The world's biggest social media company is quickly becoming toxic for its own users. Bureau Report, World is One.
Are you part of WhatsApp family groups? Well, most of us are. What is the first message that you get on those groups? Let me guess. A good morning text. I know people mean well, but these messages have become the scourge of internet. Good morning with a blooming flower, good morning with a smiling baby, good morning with an inspirational quote. How many versions can Indians produce? Infinite, apparently. All these texts may seem fun and benign, but guess what? They're literally breaking the internet. If your phone is freezing a lot, or if your internet is taking forever to load, blame the good morning texts. They're clogging the internet. 1 in 3 Indian smartphone users runs out of space daily, 1 in 3. In the US, that number is 1 in 10. Where is this data going? Forwarded messages, pictures, GIFs, videos. And I know what you're thinking. Surely the internet is not so easy to break. But let me remind you of the numbers. India has 390 million WhatsApp users. 390 million. Many of them are active in multiple groups. That's good morning squared millions. Do you see the problem now? India's forwarded messages are creating a traffic jam, and the folks at Silicon Valley are clueless. Is there any reason for this obsession? Well, there is. And I'm afraid the culprits are older Indian citizens. They're new to WhatsApp. They're new to technology. This is their way of adapting to changing times. Basically, bring their normal life into WhatsApp. Just check your phones. Most of the forwarded messages will be from your older relatives. They have a set template. Sunflowers, babies, beautiful landscapes. It's all very sweet. Unfortunately, it's also making your phone slow. In the last 5 years, there's been a 10-fold rise in searches for good morning pictures. And in India, a 9-fold increase in people downloading them. Where do you think these pictures end up? In our phones. We can do two things here. One, use technology to remove all this junk. I'm talking about applications that clear your phone space. Dozens of them are available on the app market. Option number two is understanding the problem. Why are so many older Indians addicted to WhatsApp forwards? Yes, it helps them adapt to social media, but this seems like a never-ending phenomenon. So here's a thought. Maybe they feel lonely. Maybe their children are in different cities. Maybe their health keeps them indoors. So social media becomes their life, their window to the world outside. They see something on the internet and they want to share. One message becomes a dozen forwards, and a dozen forwards become a million texts. India's massive population makes the arithmetic worse. It's also a commentary on our times. People live secluded lives. There's no one to crack a joke with. So you forward it on WhatsApp. Plus, there is no one to teach older citizens how to use social media. We've seen teenagers help their grandparents. They download the app, they show them how to send messages, but they don't tell them what messages to send. We find a million forwards irritating. They don't. In fact, they look forward to it. This is the main cause of India's forwards pandemic. But it's not the only one. There are some loose cannons on social media, both old and young. They share fake news, propaganda videos, sometimes even hateful content. Their agenda is quite clear, stirring trouble. And it's up to social media companies to take action. There's very little that society can do here. But let me end on a lighter note. You have sinister hackers trying to slow down the internet. You have Russians and North Koreans sending cyber bombs, all complicated stuff. And then you have Indians pausing the internet with a simple good morning. Beat that. We'll wrap with that, leaving you with Gravitas images. Thanks for watching.